We begin simply by allowing the world to fade away. There's no place we need to be except.
Exactly. Here, don't let the weight of your head surrender to the pillow beneath it.
Feel the solid presence of the surface supporting the whole length of your spine. You do not need to hold yourself up. Just let gravity do its gentle work. We will take a breath now. A very slow intake of air. Pulling it deep down into the lungs without strain or effort. Hold the breath lightly, just for a moment of quiet stillness, and then release it.
A long, soft sigh of surrender. Letting the shoulders drop just a little further away from the ears.
We follow this rhythm.
Inflow. Hold. Outflow.
Each breath is an anchor, securing you to the present moment, calming the restless mind as the body settles deeper. We begin our slow drift, moving across the immense expanse of time, searching for a very specific, very ordinary night. We are traveling north toward the fjords and fields of Scandinavia. We are looking for the year 800 AD. The world we enter is extremely quiet. It is a time before the mechanical noise of modern life, before the constant hum of electricity. The deepest silence is the only sound that truly matters here. We settle down near a simple, sturdy longhouse. Not a great hall of kings, but the communal home of farmers and shipwrights. People whose lives are defined by the rhythm of the seasons and the cold, powerful presence of the surrounding sea. The darkness is profound. Not the dim, artificial darkness of the city, but the heavy, encompassing velvet black of the deep northern night. The moon, if it is present at all, is hidden behind a thick blanket of cloud, giving the sky a low, heavy texture. The cold air hangs low, still, and sharp. It carries the faint, crisp scent of pine resin and freezing salt spray from the nearby water. You can sense the sheer mass of the structure. The longhouse walls are built of massive, interlocking timber logs, chinked with mud and moss to keep the cold from penetrating too deeply. Imagine placing your hand against that wall. The rough, damp texture of the old wood. The slow, deep chill that radiates from it. We move inside now, softly. Without disturbing the sleep of the inhabitants, the interior is shrouded in a deep gloom. The only light source is the central hearth. It is not a fire anymore, but a pit of deep, glowing red coals, carefully banked beneath a thick layer of ash. These coals are the sleeping heart of the house, maintaining a precious warmth that keeps life possible through the long, demanding night. A faint, constant, and comforting smell permeates everything. It is the aroma of wood smoke that has been absorbed into the walls and the earth floor over generations. It mixes with the scent of damp wool, dried fish hanging from the rafters, and the earthy musk of human and animal bodies sleeping in proximity. We are situated on one of the broad, low sleeping platforms that line the inner walls. These are simple constructions, built wide enough for entire families to lie side by side, sharing the warmth of their bodies beneath heavy, unprocessed wool blankets and thick animal hides. The texture of the blanket is crucial. It is heavy, scratchy, rich with the natural lanolin oil of the sheep, lending it a slightly oily, organic smell. The weight is comforting, an anchor against the vast coldness outside. Listen now to the sound of the longhouse at rest. That is a chorus of soft, deep, steady breathing, 20 or 30 lives existing together, their respiratory rhythms harmonizing into a collective, quiet whisper. The gentle, almost rhythmic wheezing of a body deep in sleep. The occasional soft snort or the deep exhalation through the nose. This collective breath is the quiet sound of survival. You can hear the subtle movement of the straw, bedding beneath the hides. A slight rustle as someone shifts their weight, searching for a more comfortable position. The sound is dry and hushed from the corners of the ceiling, where the thick thatch meets the supporting timbers. We detect the very faintest sounds of the surrounding environment. The structure itself is always settling. The massive roof beams groan softly in the cold, contracting and expanding with agonizing slowness. A low, deliberate creak that is barely audible, yet totally pervasive. Tick, groan, settled up. These are the slow noises of the ancient. Wood adjusting to the pressure of the night. The embers in the hearth give off a minimal, pulsating light. It is enough to define the edges of the sleeping figures, lumps beneath the hides, and to cast deep, elongated shadows that stretch across the packed earth floor and climb the walls. Watch the shadows. They are still, only moving when a draft slips through a poorly fitted joint in the timber, causing the smoke, which hangs low and blue in the center of the air, to swirl imperceptibly. The air is undeniably cold, but it is not freezing inside this shelter. The heat management is primitive but efficient. The bodies, the thick walls, the banked fire, they hold the essential life-giving warmth captive. Imagine the absolute exhaustion that has settled upon these bodies. They work the long daylight hours, hauling nets, tending livestock, shaping wood, forging iron. This rest is profound. There is no tension in the jaw, no urgency in the hands, just the deep, necessary surrender of muscle and mind. The simplicity of their lives dictates the simplicity of their sleep. They are far removed from the complex anxieties of the distant future. Tonight, they only exist within the safety of this thick, smoky timber shell. Occasionally, there's the distant sound of an animal secured outside. Maybe a horse tied up under a lean-to, stamping its hoof once against the frozen ground. A muffled clop that travels far in the stillness, or perhaps the faint, soft lap of water. The fjord is nearby. The quiet, relentless motion of tiny waves kissing the shore stones. Lapping, lapping. A quiet rhythm that reinforces the stillness. The silence here is not empty. It is full of life that has simply paused. We focus again on the interior air. It is heavy with sleep. The smoke is gentle now, no longer sharp, but a deep, smoky perfume that signifies safety and shelter. Breathe it in slowly. The ancient scent of a home constructed entirely of the earth and the forest. We observe the simple material culture around us. The tools of the day are stacked neatly near the walls. A wooden bowl, a sturdy axe head, a simple spindle for wool. These objects lie inert, waiting for the first touch of the pale, gray light of dawn to reactivate their purpose. The two are resting. Their utility suspended until the sun returns. Look closely at the sleeping figures. They are wrapped tight. Only the gentle rise and fall of their chest confirms that they are breathing deeply and fully. The dreams they are having are likely simple, pragmatic dreams. Dreams of good weather, dreams of a safe return from the sea, dreams of healthy yields from the planting. Dreams tied entirely to the tangible world, immediately surrounding them. There is a profound sense of continuity in this longhouse. Generations have slept here, breathing the same smoky air, listening to the same creaking timbers. The rhythm of life has remained largely unchanged for hundreds of years. The stillness of the deep. Night in 800 AD is complete. The mind begins to slow down, matching the rhythm of the breathing in the collective darkness. The thoughts slow their pace, becoming heavier, more deliberate, and gradually dissolving into the sensory experience. Feel the texture of the rough cloth against your skin. The coolness of the air on your exposed face. The absolute heavy stillness of the surrounding shadows. There's nothing urgent demanding attention. Nothing requiring a sudden movement or rapid thought. This is the boring Viking Age. The time spent simply waiting for the sun to return. The slow, essential hours dedicated to restoring the body. The sound of the embers settling is nearly inaudible now. A soft, tiny crumble of carbonized wood falling further into itself. A low, whispering sound of heat dying back just a bit more. The air continues to circulate, slowly. The colder, cleaner air is drawn in from the smoke hole, displacing the heavier, warmer air near the floor. Cycling the necessary elements of the atmosphere. Is a silent, gentle exchange, orchestrated by the temperature differential between the inside and the expansive. Indifferent cold outside. We remain anchored to the sleeping platform. Our weight is heavy, supported, motionless. The breath is deep, quiet, and entirely surrendered. Listen one last time to the sound of the people sleeping around you. Their presence is a comfort, a reassurance of collective survival. A quiet murmur of life continuing, steadily and inevitably. Through the longest hours of the deep northern night, let your own breath fall into that same deep rhythm, slowing, settling, dissolving, drifting deeply into the ancient, profound peace of the ordinary. Forgotten darkness. We step now from the soft warmth of the inner chamber. The air changes subtly as we approach the heavy door. It is not an abrupt coldness, but a gentle cooling. A transition zone where the deep, resinous scent of pine smoke begins to mingle with the clean DMP fragrance of the outside night. The door itself is heavy oak, thick and planed crudely, secured by a single, solid wooden bar set into deep sockets in the frame. To move it requires a slow, sustained pressure, avoiding any sudden jarring sound. We are out now. We stand upon the immediate threshold of the longhouse, the primary shelter for these early Norse communities around 800 AD. Look down at the earth directly beneath your feet. It is packed clay and fine gravel, constantly trodden down over decades, creating a hard, reliable surface that drains water slowly but surely. It is cool under the sole, almost silent. The architecture here is dictated by necessity and the immediate availability of material. There is no flourish, no plaintive grandeur, only the profound protective weight of the earth itself. We observe the wall of the longhouse, receding into the deep shadows on either side.
It is not made purely of timber.
That would be too resource intensive for the sheer scale required to house multiple families, livestock, and supplies. Instead, the wall is a complex layering of insulation and support. Heavy upright posts, thick as a man's chest, are sunk deep into the earth. Between these posts, the structure is filled with wattle and daub, a woven lattice of thin, flexible branches packed with a dense mixture of clay, sand, and often animal hair or manure for binding strength. But the most characteristic element is the outer layer. Many longhouses in this era, especially those meant for long-term settlement, were built with an exterior protective skin of turf. Imagine this turf, lifted in thick, square slabs from the surrounding meadowland. Root systems still tightly knitted together. These slabs are stacked deliberately, leaning slightly inward toward the wooden frame, forming a wall perhaps 3 feet thick at the base. This turf is crucial. It acts as an incredible sound dampener, absorbing the distant sounds of the fjord or the faint cries of nocturnal birds. It is a slow living insulation. The entire settlement feels anchored by this massiveness. The sounds of the sleeping inhabitants inside the low snores. The shifting of straw bedding are utterly muffled by the dense earth and packed clay. We move along the outer wall, brushing lightly against the damp, fibrous surface of the turf. It smells overwhelmingly of cold, dark soil, of lingering moisture, and of the slow decay of last year's grasses. The narrow path we follow hugs the building tightly. Settlements like this rarely featured grand avenues or structured streets. They grew organically, dictated by the easiest route between one necessity and the next. These paths are therefore meandering, often just wide enough for 2 people to pass comfortably, defined by the edge of the house wall on one side and the faint, low fence of a neighboring enclosure on the other. Look up now, to the roof line. The roof is where the immense weight of the longhouse culminates. It is designed with a gentle, sloping pitch, rarely sharp, so that the rain and the slow melting snow slide down without eroding the supporting walls too quickly. This roof is thatched, piled high with reeds, rushes, or thick rye straw harvested from the wetlands. It is perhaps the softest part of the whole structure, yet it performs the heaviest duty-keeping. The internal warmth contained and the external wetness out. The straw is bound tightly, laid in thick, overlapping layers, and secured at the ridge with long, narrow pieces of split timber or heavy stones to prevent the wind from lifting the entire crest in a sudden gust. The sound of the wind here, moving across the thatched surface, is not sharp or whistle-like. It is a heavy, sustained sigh, a low, continuous whisper as the air flows over the 1,000 tiny, dry cylinders of the reed stalks. Follow the line of the roof down again. where the thatch overhangs the wall slightly. This slight overhang is deliberate, protecting the vulnerable turf wall from constant dripping erosion. We look across the narrow, moonlit path to the neighboring structure. It is another longhouse, perhaps slightly smaller, perhaps facing a different direction to catch the weak winter light optimally. The path between them is swallowed by shadow, illuminated only intermittently by the high, pale crescent of the moon, which struggles to penetrate the Scandinavian night sky haze. The shadows are the deepest texture of this street. They are not merely the absence of light. They are thick, dark pools settling along the bases of the walls and pooling in the slight depressions of the path where water sometimes stands after a rainstorm. There are no street lamps. Of course, the only light comes from the astronomical source or the faint, reddish glow escaping the single smoke hole high in the ridge of the houses, indicating that the hearth fire is still gently breathing within. Observe the ground again. In the center of this narrow pathway, the earth is slightly smoother, slightly firmer. This is the main track of daily movement, the central channel of human and animal circulation. To the side. Close to the turf walls, the ground is softer, sometimes overgrown with hardy, low-lying moss that thrives on the constant dampness exuded by the turf insulation. The smell of the street is complex. Predominantly, it is earth and smoke, but there is an underlying, unavoidable scent of the community's waste and livestock. Near the back of the longhouse, where the animal stalls are often situated, the scent of hay, manure, and damp wool hangs heavier, a dull, rich smell that speaks of necessary labor and contained warmth. We move slowly, our steps barely disturbing the settled silence. The speed of life here, even during the active day, is dictated by the energy required to sustain existence. At night, that slowness intensifies into near stillness. Imagine traversing this path during the deep, dark part of the early morning hours around 3 a.m. The cold is sharp, penetrating through heavy wool layers. The air feels clean, scrubbed by the darkness. There are no right angles in this settlement, or very few. Everything curves, softens, or follows the natural contours of the land. The path twists slightly ahead, responding to the placement of a large storage pit dug years ago. Or perhaps the route taken around a sacred stone that was too large to move. We pause by a low, sturdy fence fashioned from rough-hewn timbers driven unevenly into the earth. This fence marks the boundary of a small enclosed yard, perhaps for chickens, or maybe a temporary pen for a pregnant away. The air here is absolutely silent, save for the faint, steady trickle of water somewhere nearby, perhaps runoff from a spring, or simply the slow drip from the saturated thatch after a cold fog has settled and condensed. This water sound is hypnotic. A soft, constant presence that reminds us that the land is always working, always moving moisture. Look closely at the texture of the wood used for this fence. It is rough cut, likely split using wedges rather than sawn, showing the natural, uneven grain of the timber. The surface is gray and worn smooth by exposure to hundreds of seasons of rain and frost. The wood absorbs the moonlight differently than the turf does. The turf is dull black, swallowing the weak light. The exposed wood catches the light on its slight curves and raised grains, reflecting a pale, silvery sheen. We continue our slow observation of the settlement's core. The arrangement of these heavy, silent structures conveys security. They are built low to the ground, hunkering down against the fierce coastal or inland winds. They are not meant to impress. They are meant to endure. The deep, dark eaves cast permanent shadows beneath them, offering excellent protection from the midday summer sun and a safe, dry place to stack firewood or hang nets to dry during the long winter. The sound of the packed earth beneath us is the only sound of our movement. It is a soft, compressed crunching, easily absorbed by the vast, silent volume of the night. We notice a subtle change in the path ahead. It begins to slope very gently downward, directing us toward what is likely the communal well or perhaps the edge of the settlement, where the land falls away toward the water source. The drainage here, in the narrow pathways, is entirely reliant on this subtle gradient. There are no paved gutters, just the natural tendency of water to seek the lowest point. The smell of the water, cool and clean, begins to assert itself as we descend the soft slope. We pass a small ancillary structure, a tiny shed, perhaps 6 feet square, built entirely of stacked logs or simple upright posts supporting a small, flat roof. This might be a smithy, or a storehouse for high-value items like specialized tools or iron. Its small, closed door is sealed tight, secured with a wooden pin. The silence surrounding this structure is absolute, testifying to its non-use during the sleeping hours. We consider the sheer effort represented by this architecture. Every beam, every piece of turf, every basket of clay was moved by hand and secured with simple tools. This physical investment gives the structures an immense psychological weight. A feeling of deep permanence and rooted safety. The sleep enjoyed within these walls is a deep, protected rest, guarded by the thickness of the earth and the weight of the timber. We turn now, retracing our steps very slowly back toward the heart of the settlement, allowing the subtle upward slope of the path to guide our pace. As we ascend, the shadows deepen again, swallowing the details of the ground and leaving only the looming, dark shapes of the longhouse walls to define the space. The sight of the longhouse, repetitive and dull, is profoundly soothing. Every structure is similar, every material is predictable, every shadow falls in the same heavy, familiar way. There is no anxiety in this visual monotony. Imagine the perspective of a sleepy watchman, moving along this path during the longest night of the year. His senses are entirely conditioned to the subtle sounds of the structure, the almost imperceptible cracking of a cooling timber, the occasional movement of a rat within the straw insulation, or the soft, wet sound of dew gathering on the thatch. He knows that if there is a sound that matters, it will be distinct from the gentle, ongoing symphony of the settled structure. We look again at the turf wall nearest to us. The low moon catches the top edge of a slab, revealing the texture of the dried roots, almost like coarse hair clinging to the earth. The cold radiates off this mass of earth and clay, a deep, stable cold that anchors the building to its environment. The scent of peat smoke strengthens now, indicating we are approaching the main hearth area of a large dwelling. It is a comforting, acrid smell, testifying to warmth, cooked food, and the central focus of domestic life. We move past a small, dark opening set low in the wall, a ventilation gap perhaps, or a place where excess water might drain from the inner stable area. The sound that emerges from this low opening is a muffled, rhythmic chewing, a cow or ox ruminating slowly in the internal stalls. A sound entirely encased by the earth walls. It is a sound of peace, of necessary routine. The animals are secure, the people are secure, and the world outside the protective walls of turf and timber is held at bay by the immense weight of the construction. We follow the last curve of the path, where it meets a slightly wider area, the communal gathering space, or perhaps the boundary of the market area, currently empty and silent under the moon. The ground here is looser, sandier, testifying to the heavier foot traffic during the day. We stand for a moment in this open space, allowing the scale of the architecture to settle over us. The houses are not tall, rarely exceeding a single story, but they are incredibly long, stretching sometimes for 50, 70, even 80 feet. They're like sleeping land masses themselves, long dark shapes resting on the earth. This is the beauty of this boring Viking Age street. It is a space defined by solid, silent functionality. The architecture is heavy, earthbound, and deeply reassuring in its simplicity. There are no unnecessary elements to distract the mind. Only the quiet certainty of solid wood and piled earth, forming a protective shell against the Scandinavian night. We breathe slowly, taking in the deep, cold scent of smoke and dew. The shadows lengthen subtly as the moon continues its slow journey across the sky. The deep black pools between the houses shift their borders, creeping fractionally across the packed earth. The entire scene is moving toward its deepest point of rest. the stillest part of the night when even the distant whispers of the water seem to draw back into silence. The walls hold the warmth. The turf holds the silence. The narrow paths hold the dark, and we are enveloped in the profound, predictable safety of the ordinary, moonlit Viking street, settling down into the quiet sleep promised by sturdy, simple architecture. The darkness is heavy, soft, and still the heavy door has been drawn shut, silencing the last domestic murmurs of the day within the longhouse. The thick oak, smeared with tallow against the damp evening, holds the accumulated heat of the day's hearth fire deep inside the earth-banked walls. We have moved away from the lingering warmth of a settlement, standing instead against the rough-hewn timbers of the storage shed, facing out toward the great, silent expanse of the north that the air in the early Viking Age is impossibly clean, tasting only of damp peat, cold stone, and the distant, bracing scent of the fjord water. It is a darkness that modern eyes rarely encounter. A true, light-devouring void that seems to press in close against the skin. Dense and enveloping. There's no illumination, save for the very faint, lingering reddish haze above the banked coals of the smithy, which ceased its rhythmic hammering hours ago. We are waiting for the deep night, for the sky to reach its fullest expression of silence and light. Allow your gaze to drift down toward the unseen boundary of the world. The horizon is not a sharp line tonight. It is a softened, almost watercolor bleed where the deepest indigo of the northern sky meets the absolute shadow mass of the earth. If we are near the coast, there is the relentless, ancient sound of water moving stones, a low, sustained, rhythmic hum that serves as the world's most reliable metronome. This sound never changes. It is the pulse of the great cold sea, the mare nostrum of the Norse, rolling endlessly against the silent, enduring shores of Scandinavia. Notice how that sound seems to pull your consciousness down into its repetitive pattern. A steady, soothing anchor in the darkness. Listen to the water. The water moving constantly, always moving, yet always staying exactly where it should be. This is the edge of known territory. The low stretch where the great fears and the great hopes of this age reside. The horizon promises unknown settlements, the rich green lands that lie across the waves, and the terrible power of the churning gray ocean. But tonight, it only offers peace. It is a silent, unmoving testament to distance. A distance so absolute it feels like another dimension. A separation that allows the mind to truly rest, knowing that whatever dangers lie beyond that shadow line, they cannot reach us through this small, protected circle of the present moment. Let your vision grow accustomed to the nothingness of the far ground, feeling the vast, unbroken emptiness that stretches away toward the North Pole. It is a sense of scale that diminishes the small worries into whispers. Now, lift your gaze slowly, follow the curve of the air upward. Cast the dark, wet outline of the nearby juniper bushes, whose shapes seem to shift slightly in the profound darkness. The initial view is overwhelming. There are simply too many lights in the sky. In the Viking Age, the atmosphere unpolluted by any distant city glow. The stars do not twinkle so much as they burn. Resolute points of diamond fire pinned firmly to the deep black velvet dome above. The air is steady tonight, still, and they hold their positions perfectly. They do not jitter or waver. They simply exist in their cold, clear light. Find the most familiar friend, the small, constant pinprick that stays put while all the rest of creation slowly turns around it. The North Star, or a lodestar. The anchor point of the heavens. It hangs low in the northern sky. A beacon for the sailor and the shepherd alike, an unchanging witness to the steady, methodical turning of the ages below. Around this fixed point, the rest of the great celestial clock revolves, slow and sure, completing its journey once every rotation of the earth. Feel the deep, chilling cold that seems to radiate down from that boundless, absolute space. It is the cold of pure vacuum, the deep, ancient sleep of the universe settling over the small, warm leaves nestled below the turf roofs, We are looking into what the Norse people speak of as Ginnungagap, the yawning void that preceded creation, now filled with the brilliant scattered light of distant, unimaginable worlds. Follow the pale, gauzy smear that arches high overhead, stretching like a river across the whole length of the sky. This is the winter road, the path of the dead spirits, the great highway of the gods themselves, leading onward into Asgard and beyond. We know it now as the Milky Way. But here in the 9th century, it is a mystery of breathtaking, ethereal scope, a dusting of white light.
So faint, it seems only just beyond the grasp of clear sight.
A breath of cold smoke suspended against the deep midnight blue. Try to pick out individual stars within that cloud. Right at the center of the luminous arc. It is difficult, almost impossible. They merge into a single, overwhelming, unified river of light, flowing silently, continuously, across the high roof of the world, never ceasing its slow, deliberate passage. Let the weight of that cosmic depth press gently upon you, not as a burden, but as an overwhelming sense of perspective. The sheer immensity of the sky works a peculiar magic on the human mind standing alone in the darkness. It shrinks the small anxieties of the day, the worries over the sick calf, the fear of the coming winter stores, the lingering ache and weariness in the bones. All these small concerns diminish beneath the silent, indifferent yet beautiful scrutiny of a billion ancient suns. The only sound now, besides the rhythmic water, is the faint, internal echo of your own steady, slow breathing. Inhale the cold, clean air deeply, feeling it travel down, cleansing the mind. Exhale the last remnants of effort, of holding on. Focus only on the vast, ancient patterns etched above you. Don't notice how the constellations, those familiar pictures drawn by generations of watchful ancestors, seem to tilt slowly, deliberately. As the night deepens and the hours pass unnoticed, the Great Wagon, or Karlsvagnen, the wagon of Karl, dipping toward the northern horizon, its 3-star handle pointing steadily toward the distant pole. It is a slow, almost imperceptible movement, demanding patience to observe. But the sky is always moving. Nothing in the universe is truly still. Yet everything seems suspended in this tranquil, endless moments of observation. We are watching time itself move, not in frantic seconds, but in the majestic, millennia-long sweep of the cosmos, the silent clock turning over the great cold stones of the sky. The observation is not entirely passive for the people of this age. The stars are the calendar, the clock, and the map all in one. They are the silent, reliable markers of when the ships must be launched for raiding or trade, when the great feast must be prepared, when the harvest must begin, and when the longest, deepest night of Yule is finally approaching. They are the only truly trustworthy guideposts in a harsh and unpredictable world. Look again at the very dimmest stars, those near the periphery of vision, stars you can only just glimpse if you look slightly away from them. They do not flash or strobe. They hold a soft, steady, ancient light, traveling for so long across the void, crossing countless years, just to reach your eye at this specific still moment. It is a profound connection to the deepest past, a light, older than the longhouse behind you, older than the forests that blanket these hills, older perhaps than the very mountains that frame this Scandinavian inlet. Let your eyes grow heavy from the sheer, unending vastness. Do not try to define the patterns or remember the obscure, forgotten names assigned to them by ancient poets. Simply absorb the light. Allow the sheer, comforting scale of the night sky to cradle your consciousness, to wash away the sharp edges of the day. The stars are repeating their perfect, eternal loop exactly as they did last night, and as they will tomorrow night. The earth is turning silently, surely, continuing its steady orbit, and you are standing here, a small warm point of life in the infinite cold, perfectly safe, perfectly still, watching the slow passage of the year 800 AD settle into its deepest slumber. This long vigil of the night has begun. It is a time for quiet rest. Guided only by the distant ancient beacons of the sky, the deep silence of the world enters the mind. Filling the space where noise and worry once resided, let your thoughts drift out toward that distant silver band of the winter road, knowing that its light is constant, regardless of the small dramas unfolding below. You are witnessing a true, undisturbed Viking night, a profound stillness broken only by the rhythmic water and a soft breath escaping your lips into the cold. Clear air. The universe waits, silent, patient, and full of light. Rest now, under the unchanging eye of the lodestar. Rest now.
We move now past the gentle glow of the hearth,
leaving behind the immediate, contained warmth of the human structure. The sleep of the Viking Age villager is not accompanied by silence.
It is attended by an orchestra of deep, slow, natural
rhythm, a perpetual hum that defines the northern night. It is a quiet woven not from absence, but from the slow, deliberate movement of the world outside the sleeping house. The heavy door, made of ancient oak and secured by a simple wooden bar, holds back the chill, but it cannot stop the sound. Sound is a traveler here, a ghost moving lightly over the heavy, sleeping land. The first and perhaps most pervasive sound is the sigh of the forest. The great ancient forest that surrounds and defines the settlement. The air itself, cold and dry after the long autumn twilight, is the conductor of this slow symphony. It brushes against the rough bark of the standing trees, pulling out a continuous, soft friction. It is a sound that requires patience to hear. A frequency so low it often feels more like a pressure change against the eardrum than an audible noise. Listen closely, and you can begin to distinguish the different types of sleep among the trees. The small, hard leaves of the birch, shivering and high upon their delicate branches, produce a dry, whispering rustle. This is the lightest voice. The Scandinavian night, a constant, slightly high-pitched murmur, like soft sand shifting endlessly across stone. It never stops. Even when the air seems perfectly still near the ground, the upper canopy catches the drift of the cold air currents. The birch leaves are restless, creating a million tiny, synchronized frictions against each other. They are the sound of the environment breathing shallowly in its slumber. Below the birch, the heavy, dark needles of the great northern pine offer a different quality of quiet. The pine absorbs sound, creating cushions of shadow and muffling the immediate vicinity of the house. But when the wind gathers momentum, not in a gust, but in a long sustained pull, the pine boughs create a deep, resonant hush. It is an oceanic sound, a low, continuous drone that mimics the far-off roar of the northern sea. A sound built of density, of millions of sharp points resisting the slow motion of the atmosphere. It is the sound of deeply rooted age. This sound is profoundly boring, profoundly consistent, and utterly essential to the hypnotic rhythm of the Viking night. It is the bass note in the score of the sleeping village. If you focus on this pine sound, allowing its low frequency to settle into your attention, you find that it seems to originate everywhere, nowhere at once. It is a universal texture of the Scandinavian landscape. It reminds the sleeping inhabitant of the vast, cold emptiness just outside the circle of the village. A constant reminder of the primal power held just beyond the wooden fence. The sounds of the forest floor contribute their own subtle layers to this woven silence. The dry grasses, bent and brittle from the cold, offer a rare, sharp crackle when a small creature moves through them. The settling of dew, the cold moisture condensing on moss and stone, introduces a faint, almost subliminal hiss. The chemical reaction of cold meeting surface. This is the sound of extreme patience. Moving beyond the immediate forest edges, we drift toward the most compelling and continuous sound of all. The sound of water in motion. All Viking settlements were situated near water. The fjord, the river, the coastal stream. Water is the defining feature of travel, sustenance, and the psychological landscape. And at night, water becomes the perpetual lullaby. If the village is coastal, resting near the mouth of a long fjord, the sound is that of slow, heavy, repetitive lapping. This is not the chaotic crash of the open sea, but the gentle, rhythmic pulse of contained water folding in on itself. Each wave, softened by the confining walls of the fjord, arrives at the shore as a slow, deliberate heave. The water meets the mud and stone of the small harbor in a consistent soft shoes. A sound of wetness meeting hardness. Endlessly repeated. Shoes. Retreat. Shoes. Retreat. The water finds the worn, smooth timbers of the longboats moored near the shore. These boats, sleeping just as heavily as their owners, begin to creak and rub in response to the water's nudge. This is a deep, low, organic sound, the moan of wet wood fibers flexing under pressure. It is slow and infrequent, often separated by long stretches of liquid silence. Deep, liquid silence. Creek. This interaction between the sleeping vessels and the slow tide is perhaps the most ancient sound known to the coastal communities. The sound of tools resting, guarded by the deep water. Further inland, where the settlement relies on a running stream or a narrow river, the sound profile shifts from lapping resonance to perpetual motion. The river does not arrive and retreat. It flows. It is a constant downward push of heavy, cold volume. The sound is a continuous, low murmur, broken only by the resistance offered by stones and bends in the riverbed. Listen closely to the tributary that feeds the main stream, the small channel running down from the high meadow. Here, the water speaks in tiny, highly focused iterations. It is the sound of cold droplets dripping from an unseen ledge, hitting the surface tension of the pool below with a clean, sharp, delicate plink. Blink? Plink? Then, the trickling sound, the whisper of water moving over thousands of small, smooth pebbles. This sound is characterized by a low, consistent friction, a ceaseless agitation that is nevertheless entirely peaceful. It is the sound of constant work, performed without effort, without complaint. The stream is sorting the sediment, perpetually, moving the earth, all while maintaining its low, soothing drone. The volume of the stream is constant, yet the texture of its sound shifts every few minutes, responding to a change in the riverbed. A passing piece of driftwood, or the subtle cooling of the water itself, is a sonic blanket, consistent enough to be ignored, yet always present as a confirmation of the natural world's unwavering stability. This hypnotic quality of the moving water often serves as the anchor point for the deepest sleep. The sound is predictable, unvarying, and infinitely repetitive. It demands nothing from the listener but surrender. Away from the water and the trees. We turn our attention back toward the immediate architecture of the sleeping village. Even the man-made structures contribute their own subtle voice to the night. The longhouses, built from heavy timbers joined with pegs and moss chinking, are never truly static. As the external temperature drops sharply against the internal temperature of the banked hearth, the wood begins to contract. These are not violent shifts, but slow, deliberate movements spanning hours. The structural timber, drying out and cooling down, releases its stored tensions. The sound is a low, drawn-out groan, a deep and profoundly organic exhalation from the house itself. It sounds like the sigh of a sleeping giant, a slow wooden creak from the ridge beam, a settling sound from the foundation posts buried deep in the earth. These structural sounds are muffled by the thick turf roof and the dense, packed walls, so they arrive in the ears of the sleeper as only the barest vibration, a reassurance that the walls remain solid, the roof remains secure. Within the small enclosure, the sounds of the sleeping domestic animals are absorbed into the deep quiet. The sheep, penned tightly near the walls, shift their weight on the straw. This creates a low, dry rustle, a localized sound of friction and comfort. Perhaps a pig, dreaming or merely adjusting its heavy body, produces a small, wet snort, quickly swallowed by the surrounding darkness. These animal sounds are the softest confirmation of life within the palisade, a breathing warmth that counters the vast, empty cold outside. If we move higher, listening not to the ground, but to the air above the village, we hear the true hunters of the night, the owl,
the patient scavenger, makes its slow passage over the roof lines. The sound is not the flapping of wings,
which is often silent, but the incredibly distant.
low call, who dot. It is a sound that arrives from a great distance, flattened by the cold, heavy air. A sound that is ancient and deeply focused.
It does not speak of violence, but of immense patient solitude. The call of the owl is a marker of time passing, a slow punctuation in the long, dark hours between the setting of the sun and the first gray light of dawn. Below the flight path of the owl. And even closer to the ground than the sound of the stream is the deep, subtle thrum of the earth itself. The heavy silence of the night presses down upon the soil, forcing the attention toward what is unmoving, constant, and fundamental. If you stood perfectly still, breathing slow and shallow, you might perceive the feeling of immense geological quiet, the slight vibration caused by subterranean water flows,
or the infinitesimal settling of the immense granite bedrock beneath the Scandinavian soil. This is the sound of stability.
A profound, steady pressure that defines the world the Vikings inhabit. It is the deep, boring reality of the land. It is the sound of cold stone resting, waiting for the long,
slow passage of the millennia. The air itself begins to cool significantly toward the deepest part of the night.
The hour before the first hint of morning light. As the air cools, sound transmission changes. It becomes clearer, sharper, carrying small noises further across the frozen landscape. The snap of a tiny twig in the far woods,
perhaps caused by a resting fox or a roaming hare,
travels with surprising clarity across the valley. It is a single sharp percussion sound, instantly consumed by the ensuing heavy silence. The cumulative effect of these myriad small sounds is not noise, but texture. A continuous, sensory hum that eliminates the harsh shock of true silence. The Viking Age night is defined by this woven tapestry of soft, consistent sound. The dry, incessant whispering of the birch leaves
high above the low, resonant hush of the pine canopy,
creating the oceanic backdrop. The patient, repetitive lapping of the fjord water, forever folding and reforming against the shore. The quick, clean trickle of the smaller streams moving tirelessly over hidden stones. The occasional, slow groan of the house structure settling into its deep, temporary sleep. All these elements integrate into a single, comprehensive atmosphere of deep, cold peace. A state of auditory saturation so complete that the human mind classifies it as quiet. Is the necessary sound that allows for deep, restorative slumber. The rhythmic, hypnotic quality of the natural world confirms that all is in its ordered place. The village is protected, the water flows, the trees stand firm. There's nothing immediate demanding attention. There's no urgency in the wind, no panic in the water. This environment of consistent, predictable natural noise frees the mind from the need for alertness, sinking the conscious awareness into the deep, heavy velvet of the northern darkness. The sleep of the longhouse is sound profoundly boring. It is the sleep accompanied by the steady, unvarying soundtrack of the 8th century Scandinavian landscape. A rhythm established long before the first longhouse was ever built, and one that continues to repeat, slow passage after slow passage, through the deepest, coldest part of the night. The rhythm of the planet turning, the water moving, and the wood settling. The profound, soothing boredom of a world at rest. The silence is never absolute, but the sounds are so constant that they become indistinguishable from the background texture of existence itself. We listen to the continued lapping, the soft shoots of the water on the sand, knowing that this repetitive sound will continue for hours more, moving with the deep, slow breath of the tide. And we listen to the leaves, the dry, soft friction against the cold air, waiting patiently for the subtle, distant, almost imperceptible shift in the light that will herald the slow arrival of the next long, ordinary day. The Viking Age sleeps deeply, wrapped in the comforting
complexity of these slow natural sounds are very deep.
Slow sleep indeed. The midnight hour settles heavily over the longhouse. It is a time not of activity,
Nor of planning, but of deep, unquestioned rest. The earth outside is cold, absorbing the last traces of lingering warmth that seeped from the timber walls during the long,
slow Scandinavian day. We move now with an impossible silence,
gliding through the very essence of the 9th century night. The great hall, which vibrated with voices and the clatter of bone and wood mere hours ago,
is now a cavern of quiet respiration. The air here is thick,
saturated with the history of the day just finished. It smells profoundly of wood smoke, not fresh and acrid, but ancient.
Trapped smoke that has infused the very structure of the rafters, mingled with the faint sweet scent of stored dry hay and the inescapable musk of many sleeping bodies. It is a comfortable,
encompassing scent of community and shelter. Look down the length of the hall. The only illumination comes
from the central hearth pit, and even this light is dying, surrendering its duty to the deep darkness. The fire is no longer a flame, but a vast bed of coals, deep red and pulsing with an internal slow heat. They glow not with brilliance, but with a weary persistence. Each tiny shift in the ash bed releases a faint, almost inaudible sigh. A minute hiss of final moisture escaping the last vestiges of peat or oak. Watch the shadow play. It is very slow. The faint red light crawls, inch by inch, up the massive, smoke-stained supporting posts. The shadows are long and distorted, moving only when a coal collapses softly into itself, sending a brief, muted shower of faint orange sparks into the still air. This is the only movement in the hall. This quiet disintegration of matter. The sleepers are arranged along below. Earth-bound benches that line the walls. They are indistinguishable forms now. Mounds wrapped tightly in thick, coarse wool blankets, and perhaps supplemented by heavy animal hides. Bear or ox offering insulation from the cold earth. They lie close, sharing the collective warmth, their faces turned inward toward the core heat, away from the chill edges of the room. The breathing of these 2 score of inhabitants creates a collective rhythm, a very low, steady sound, like the slow turning of a distant mill wheel. It is the sound of life sustained and temporarily paused. Listen closely. A soft snore, barely louder than the hum of the cooling wooden frame, begins, finds its resonance, and then fades slightly as the sleeper shifts weightlessly in a dream. The shift is barely perceptible, just a slight rustle of the rough woolen cloth against the packed earth floor or the wooden bench. This momentary interruption only serves to deepen the surrounding silence. The floor beneath us is hard-packed clay and earth, worn smooth by generations of footsteps. It absorbs all sound. If we were to trace the walls, our fingertips would brush against the tightly woven wattle and daub, sealed with mud and moss against the cruel intrusion of the night wind. The logs themselves feel cold, dense, ancient. They are sleeping too. They hold the structure steady, resisting the pressure of the roof, the weight of the turf and thatch that insulates the community above. There are tiny cracks, of course, everywhere. The building breathes. In the deep stillness, sometimes you can hear a faint, high-pitched creak, a structural settling, as the cold contracts the heavy timbers. It is a slow, patient sound. It speaks of enduring solidity. We walk the perimeter now, moving slowly past the storage area where the tools and weapons hang silent and dormant. The iron axe heads, polished by daylight labor and now dull in the dark, catch the faintest glimmer of the hearth's last red glow. A metallic whisper against the wood. The looms are still. The warp threads, taut all day with the vigorous rhythm of weaving, hang loose and static, anticipating the sun's return. The spinning whorls and the bone needles lie precisely where they were dropped at dusk, waiting for the return of nimble, waking fingers. Everything is suspended in expectation. Moving towards the entrance, we notice the density of the air changes. It becomes cleaner, sharper, carrying the unmistakable scent of outdoor cold. The heavy plank door is barred from the inside, secured not against violence, but against the wanderings of stray animals or the intrusive chill. If we look through the low smoke vent, or perhaps a small, carefully covered peephole near the roofline, we can glimpse the profound, open night. The sky above Scandinavia tonight is heavy that perhaps the moon is obscured by a deep layer of moving cloud, suggesting that gentle snowfall might begin before dawn. The atmosphere is one of damp cold, the temperature hovering just around freezing outside the longhouse. In the fenced enclosure known as the tun, all motion has ceased. The smaller outbuildings, the smithy, the small storage sheds for grain and dried fish, the animal byre are simple, low silhouettes against the slightly less black darkness of the horizon. The smithy, usually the loudest place on the homestead, is completely silent. The forge is dead. Cold iron holding no memory of the white heat that transformed it hours before. The anvil sits like a great dark stone, utterly still. No metallic ring. No rush of bellows, only the silent and invisible hardening of the cold metal. The animals are quiet. In the byre. The oxen and a few dairy goats are resting. Their large bodies radiate a localized, comforting warmth. Contained by the thick walls, we can hear, very faintly, the slow, rhythmic chewing of a ruminating ox, a deep, gentle grinding sound that is the very definition of contentment. No restless stamping, no bleeding. They are fully trusting in the stillness of the midnight. Beyond the low palisade fence. The fields stretch out, fallow now, waiting for the spring sowing. The earth is stiff, resisting pressure. It is drawing its own deep breath. The dry stalks of last year's harvest catch the faint moisture, becoming frosted with a film of ice that reflects nothing but the absolute darkness. This landscape is one of deep, ancient peace. It is easy to imagine the generations who have slept here. The countless hours of darkness that have passed over this specific patch of Scandinavian land. The midnight hour in 800 AD is a universal constant, connecting this sleeping community not to the excitement of raiding or trade, but to the slow, monotonous certainty of agriculture and survival. The true Viking Age. The boring Viking Age is marked by the quiet ticking of the hours as they wait for the light. Necessary to resume the necessary labor. Look up at the roof structure again. The heavy turf, supported by the beams, is slowly absorbing the night moisture. It is acting as a natural sound dampener, muffling the external world, ensuring that the inhabitants remain cocooned in their warm, smoky shelter. The occasional drip of condensed moisture falling from the ceiling beams onto the earth floor is so soft it is almost imagined. A solitary, gentle sound lost almost instantly upon impact. It is the softest sound in the house. Inmate. Back inside the main hall, our gaze returns to the hearth. The red has deepened now, almost to blackness. The coals are covered in a thin, pale gray layer of insulating ash. They will retain enough heat to be easily coaxed back to life by the first person to rise. Hours from now, but for the moment, they are resting to. The entire domestic scene is a study in thermal inertia and suspended energy. Everything is designed to slow down. To conserve. The efficiency of this domestic engineering is beautiful in its simplicity. Heat is precious, light is fleeting, and the night is long and demanding. We drift past the sleeping shapes again, noticing the small details that mark individuality, even in sleep. A hand rests outside the blanket, pale and slack. The fingers are thick, calloused, used to the weight of a heavy adze, or the pull of a fishing net. Another sleeper has pulled the woolen hood of their tunic tightly around their head, seeking extra insulation from the cool air layer that always hovers near the floor. The children, if there are any, are nestled deepest in the center, benefiting from the layers of adult warmth around them. Their breathing rapid and shallow, untroubled by the waking world. There's a small earthen jug near the water pail, left there for the inevitable midnight thirst. It catches no light. Its surface feels cool and slightly porous to the touch. The water inside is near freezing, clean and clear. drawn from the nearby well hours ago. Imagine the absolute darkness of the hour before the dawn. 3 hours or so from now, the hearth will be a completely dark patch. The cold will have intensified, reaching its peak. The sleepers will be curled even tighter. Their communal warmth, a shared necessity, that is during this deepest, darkest phase that time seems to slow to an almost complete stop. The only movement, the only life is the slow, continuous movement of the constellations above. Unseen through the dense roof, but nonetheless constant. The memory of the day's hard work. The lifting of heavy stones, the careful repair of the fishing weir, the grinding of grain on the hand mill, all that physical exertion is being quietly metabolized by the resting bodies. The muscles are softening. The breath is deep. The mind is suspended in the vast landscape of the sleeping world. We move toward the outer edge of the enclosure again. Perhaps standing near the spot where the longboats are usually drawn up onto the shore. Tonight, the boats are perhaps absent, away on a winter fishing trip, or simply shrouded in heavy cloth, waiting for the spring breakup of the ice. If they are near, they are monumental dark shapes, the smooth, overlapping streaks of the hull, the elegantly curved prow, all of it is completely inert, resting heavily on the shore gravel. There's no sound of waves crashing. Only the extremely soft, regular lap of the water against the shore rocks. A hypnotic rhythm dictated by the distant tide, not by any immediate wind. Lap, lap, lap. The sound is persistent yet gentle. A cradle song offered by the sea itself to the sleeping land. It is impossible to feel anxious in the presence of such deep, enduring monotony. The life here is secure. Not in riches or comfort, but in its rhythm. The cycle is unbreakable. Darkness follows light, cold follows heat, rest follows labor. This absolute stillness is not emptiness. It is the charging of necessary energy. We allow the sensation of the cold, dense air to wash over us. Feeling the minute vibrations of the ground, the settling earth, the movement of a small, unseen creature perhaps. A field mouse rustling in the dry grass outside the fence line. These small sounds do not break the silence. They define its extent. The silence is so profound that these tiny noises are amplified, isolated, allowed their own space in the soundscape. We are observing a society completely surrendered to the deep necessity of rest. A profound pause in the narrative of history. There are no sagas being sung now. No heroic boasts are being exchanged. Only the soft hum of survival. This midnight hour is the most honest representation of the Viking Age life, not the momentary fury of the raid, but the long, dull patience required to simply endure the northern winter. The darkness is absolute, complete, comforting. We can feel the presence of the stars even if we cannot see them. The cold certainty of the distant cosmos turning slowly above the longhouse roof. The passage of time here is slow, geological, measured only by the imperceptible cooling of the embers and the gradual approach of the morning chill. We settle down, metaphorically, in the quietest corner, near the silent store of dried firewood, inhaling the deep, resinous scent of the unprocessed timber. The wood is cold, heavy, waiting patiently for its own moment of release into heat. And light. Everything waits. Everything is still. The deep breathing of the sleepers hold. The entire 9th century suspended for a moment in this perfect, unrecorded silence. Allow the slow, steady rhythm of the breath to synchronize with your own. Inhale the scent of cold wood and ancient smoke. Exhale slowly, releasing all thought of the light, all anticipation of the dawn. We are held securely within the unmoving midnight of the Viking hull. Safe within the walls. Resting deeply, waiting for the slow return of the light. Let the final, faint red of the hearth embers gently dissolve into the encompassing blackness. Just the sound of the deep, sustained rest. A long pause in history. The shadows grow long now, stretching away from the small cluster of buildings. The work of the day, the heavy rhythm of the loom and the sharp ring of the smith's hammer, all begin to recede into a deep quiet. the air itself feels different in the late afternoon of the Viking settlement. Cooling quickly as the sun dips beneath the tree line, pulling the warmth out of the moss and the hard-packed earth that it is the time of drawing in. A slow, necessary contraction of energy, bringing everything precious closer to the protective heart of the longhouse. The smoke that drifted thinly throughout the day now settles lower, heavier, mingling with the scent of damp earth and stored root vegetables. You can smell the approaching darkness inside the communal home. The rhythm shifts from labor to maintenance, preparing the core energy that will sustain them through the long, still hours of the night. The great hearth, which has been the center of cooking and gathering, is now carefully tended for sleep. It is not extinguished, not truly, but banked. The fire must survive the darkness. It is too difficult, too cold, to restart it entirely each morning. A Viking evening involves a meticulous choreography around the embers. Heavy logs of birch or oak, chosen for their slow, deep burn, are placed at the edges. Then a layer of fine ash, pulled from the edges of the central pit, is carefully draped over the remaining red coals. This is done gently, slowly. A soft blanket of insulation pulled across the living heat below. The ash must be thick enough to prevent oxygen from feeding the flame, yet thin enough to allow the deepest core of the coal to retain its fierce memory of heat. It is a quiet art. This banking of the fire, performed with a large, flat wooden shovel or a steady hand wrapped in thick leather. The gentle scraping sound, the soft whisper of falling ash, is one of the final sounds of the working day. The longhouse itself begins to darken even before the true night arrives. The roof, heavy with turf and wood, keeps the light low. There are no true windows, only small, necessary openings high up to vent some of the smoke. These vents are now often partially covered or stuffed with woven mats to seal against the quickly dropping temperature outside. The space contracts, illuminated only by the soft, wavering orange glow emanating from the central hearth. The air, though smoky, is surprisingly warm near the ceiling, collecting the life breath of the people and the fire. The residents are moving slower now, settling onto the heavy wooden sleeping platforms built along the walls. These platforms are the beds, the gathering spaces, and the daytime seating all in one. They are wide and sturdy, built to hold several people sharing warmth. The preparation for sleep involves heavy textiles. Wool is the lifeblood of this sleep. Wool, spun thick and left deliberately coarse, retaining the natural lanolin that resists the damp chill of the earthen floor. These are not the soft, finely finished blankets of a later, more delicate age. They are heavy, scratchy, deep blankets, often smelling faintly of sheep and smoke, and the vegetable dyes used to color the edges. You might pull a large, rectangular sheepskin or deerskin hide over the rough wooden platform first. This offers a barrier against the cold that rises inevitably from the ground. The sound of the hide settling, a heavy, dull thump, is absorbed quickly by the earthy smell of the room. Then comes the wool, layer upon layer. Woven mats placed under the body for rudimentary padding. Thick, dense blankets pulled up high, often covering the entire face to create a small, humid pocket of warmth in the biting cold air. The simple process of lying down and arranging. The covering is lengthy and deliberate. Every fold must be managed, every seam checked for drafts. The darkness presses in. Outside. The sounds are different now. The persistent sigh of the wind through the eaves seems closer, more lonely. If the settlement is near the sea, you might hear the slow, rhythmic lapping of the tide, a sound that has nothing to do with human time or human worries. The dogs, curled near the edges of the hearth or under the platforms, settle with a final, deep sigh. Their heavy breathing adds to the low symphony of this sleeping longhouse. Inside the space, the sounds become incredibly intimate, amplified by the protective walls and the sheer proximity of so many bodies. The crackling of the banked fire is now irregular and soft, punctuated by small internal movements, a sliver of wood shifting, a burst of trapped gas escaping the coal. *PFF. Then silence returns. Sleep in the Viking Age was often communal, necessitated by the cold. Family slept close, often head to toe, maximizing the precious shared body heat. There is a profound sense of safety in this crowded warmth. The dangers of the night, the hungry wolf, the deep cold, the unsettling spirits of the wilderness are kept at bay by the simple presence of others. The air thickens with breathing. Slow, deep, regular breathing. A symphony of quiet exhalations. Perhaps an elder coughs softly from across the room. A dry, low sound quickly absorbed. The smell of the food consumed hours earlier still hangs in the air, the residual savor of boiled meat or simple grains, mixing subtly with the ever-present scent of wood smoke and the rich, natural aroma of human skin and unwashed wool. Is a world of textures, felt more deeply in the darkness than seen in the fleeting light. The rough wood pressing against the shoulder blade, the weight of the sheepskin pressing down upon the chest, the gentle prickle of the raw wool against the cheek. Everything feels heavy, deep, and slow. To awake in the deepest part of the Viking night is to encounter a darkness that is truly complete. No streetlights, no distant glow of a city. Only the absolute heavy absence of light, pierced occasionally by a sudden faint pulse of red from the buried coals. If one wakes, they move slowly, carefully, minimizing disturbance. The floor is cold, even through thick socks or soft leather slippers. The air away from the bed coverings immediately feels sharp. To move towards the hearth in the dead of night requires a delicate negotiation with the shadows and the sleeping forms. If the fire requires attending, it is done with the utmost slowness. A careful, whispered prayer might accompany the placement of a small, thin piece of dried kindling, just enough to coax a fleeting light from the embers. This small, brief flare of light illuminates the roof beams, throwing strange, gigantic shadows of the sleeping people onto the walls. Then the darkness rushes back in, absorbing the momentary brightness. The concept of time itself during this long, cold rest is blurred. Time is measured not by clocks, but by the physical shift of the night sky and the slow cooling of the house structure. There is the time before midnight, when the hunger and activity of the day are still settling, and then there is the deep watch, the time between midnight and the first graying of the eastern horizon, when the cold is most intense and sleep is most profound, and the world outside seems utterly still. This stillness is important. It is the time of renewal, the necessary hibernation that allows the body to endure the relentless demands of the short days. They are resting, yes, but they are also preserving. Preserving the energy, preserving the heat, preserving the vital spark of the fire that will bring them back into the new day. Consider the craft woven into the textiles covering these resting bodies. The slow, repetitive work of the spinner and the weaver, often taking place in the very light of the longhouse during the previous winter. Every thread represents many hours of quiet, patient labor. The carding of the wool, removing the debris and aligning the fibers. The rhythmic whirring of the spindle, twisting the fluff into strength. The slow passage of the shuttle across the loom. Building the fabric line by line, width by width. This immense, cumulative effort now rests heavily upon the sleeping body, a weight of protection. It is a palpable connection to the ongoing, slow cycle of life and labor. The Viking dreamscape, if we could peer into it, would likely be filled with the practicalities of their waking hours, the taste of salt, the pull of the plow, the sharp scent of pine needles, the weight of a fishing net. Their sleep is heavy, uncomplicated by the distractions of modern noise. They are anchored to the earth beneath them, shielded by the turf above, enclosed by the wood grown slowly on the nearby hills. Their rest is integrated completely into the environment. As the deepest cold of the pre-dawn arrives, the house is at its quietest peak. The fire, if well banked, is barely breathing. The only sustained sound might be the low, resonant creak of the roof structure adjusting to the shifting temperature. A slight, almost imperceptible shift occurs in the darkness. The air, which has been stagnant, begins to hold a faint new quality. Not light, but the memory of light approaching. This is often the moment when the first person stirs intentionally. Perhaps the mother responsible for the morning's gruel, or the elder responsible for stoking the fire. The movement is not sudden, but a gradual unfolding from the cocoon of blankets. A deep, slow stretch that may emit a low groan, muffled immediately by the thick textiles. The first task is the fire. The renewal of the flame. Very gently, the protective layer of ash is scraped back from the coals. The movement is precise and soft. You do not want to disturb the deep slumber of the household, especially the children. The sight of the coals, still faintly glowing red after hours of burial, is a profound relief. The heat is alive. The work of the night was successful. A few delicate puffs of breath are directed onto the coals, fanning them slightly. Then, tiny slivers of dry birch bark or shredded moss are placed upon the burgeoning heat. A small, hesitant wisp of smoke rises first, followed quickly by the crackle of new, tiny flame. The smell of fresh smoke, sharper than the residual smoke of the night, slowly permeates the house. It is the smell of awakening. This small first light of the hearth is the dawn inside the longhouse. Perceiving the true dawn outside by many minutes. It is a moment of profound quiet satisfaction. The continuity of life has been secured for another day. The shadows that were heavy and consuming now begin to retreat into the corners, yielding their space back to the faint, steady orange pulse of the renewed fire. The sound of the gentle scraping of the ash, which closed the day, now opens the new one. The rhythm of Viking life, slow and enduring, prepares to begin again. The sleepers slowly begin to stir, recognizing the new sound, the change in the air quality. Another turn of the immense slow wheel, the deep rest of the Scandinavian night recedes, leaving behind the necessary energy for the day to come. Everything moves with a profound, unhurried grace in the slowly warming light of the hearth. The cool air arrives not as a rush, but as a deliberate weight settling upon the skin. It is the texture of the late Viking night. We move now beyond the light of the longhouse hearth, leaving the thick, comforting warmth of human breath and stale fat behind us. The transition is always immediate and absolute. The difference in temperature is measured in layers of damp wool, and the sudden, sharp intake of breath that seems to scrape the throat clean. This is the breath of 800 AD, Scandinavia after midnight. It is exceptionally cold and perfectly clean, filtered through centuries of pine forest and vast, dark water. Feel the air against the cheeks. It has a slick, polished quality. It is not dry and brittle, for the surrounding environment is saturated. It carries the weight of the nearby fjord or the deep moisture of the peat bog that lies perhaps half a mile distant from the settlement palisade. This moisture is the primary carrier of the night. Since we might stand here for a very long time, simply observing how the cold stillness organizes the atmosphere. During the day, smells are jumbled and chaotic. Fresh dung, spilled ale, cooking fish, hot metal from the SMIT Y. Now, under the watchful, slow descent of the temperature, these smells separate and linger in distinct layers, like undisturbed sediment in a dark pool. The most dominant presence is always the smoke. It is no longer the thick, abrasive smoke of the active fire. That has ascended and dissipated hours ago. This is the memory of the smoke. It is the cold, residual scent that has permeated every fiber of the settlement structure. It clings to the shingle roof, saturates the thatch, rests deep within the interlocking timbers. It is heavy ash and incomplete combustion, a subtle mineral smell of carbon that seems to coat the back of the tongue. It is the perfume of human life contained. Beyond this immediate envelope of cold wood smoke, the natural world begins to assert its dominion over the senses. The ground beneath our simple leather footwear is damp, perhaps frost-kissed if the season is late. The soil here is dark and rich, having received the organic waste of the settlement for decades. But what we smell now is not the superficial stench of the waste pit. That density has been pinned down by the cold. We inhale the deep primal scent of the earth itself. It is cold loam,
compressed root systems, and the slow microbial decay of centuries. It is a profound smell of stability and rest. Mix this earth smell with the sharp, almost medicinal scent of coniferous trees. The surrounding forests, primarily pine and spruce, release their volatile oils most intensely during temperature extremes. In the height of the summer sun. This resinous smell is hot and sticky. Now, in the extreme cold, it is crisp and fragmented. It enters the nose as a sudden, sharp clarity if one stands very still. Focusing solely on the movement of the air currents, one might distinguish the faint hint of salt. The salt is a whisper carried from the sea or the nearest tidal inlet. It travels only when the wind is precisely right, sliding low over the ground and avoiding the frictional drag of the forest canopy. This oceanic scent is metallic and vast, contrasting sharply with the immediate enclosed smells of the settlement. It reminds those sleeping that their lives are bound to the edge of the world, to the indifferent coldness of the great water. The atmosphere itself dictates the pace of existence. Everything slows down. The wooden structures, which creaked and groaned throughout the heat of the day as they expanded, now settle into an almost absolute stillness. They shrink slightly in the cold, their joints tightening. The sounds we perceive now are magnified by the general silence. A distant sound of water, not rushing, but moving. Perhaps the slow, deliberate current of the river, or the lapping of the fjord against the stones on the shoreline far below the dwelling. It is a rhythmic, hypnotic sound, steady and unchanging. The quietness of the livestock is a dense blanket over the barn area. We can detect the warmth radiating from the nearby animal enclosure. A faint, sweet, slightly sour odor of wet hay, warm urine, and the heavy breathing of sheep or oxen. This smell is thick and localized, a pocket of biological heat struggling against the expansive cold. Inside the longhouse. Those few feet away, life is suspended. The deep breathing of the inhabitants is slow and uniform. Sleep in this era is not necessarily continuous, but it is deep and heavily shielded by woolen layers in close proximity to others. The air inside those wooden walls is recycled, heavy and warm. The air outside is new, constantly renewed, and intensely cold. One feels acutely the thinness of the barrier between the human warmth and the overwhelming indifference of the Scandinavian environment. The cold does more than chill the skin. It chills the noise. It absorbs the trivial sounds of the day, leaving only the essential elemental sounds of water, wood, and wind. If the wind shifts even slightly, the scent palette changes instantly. A breeze from the north might bring the true, unadulterated smell of high moorland peat. This scent is darker, earthier than the common wood smoke, reminiscent of deep, compressed fuel, a scent that speaks of time and ancient processes. Peat smoke is the smell of the land itself burning. Slowly. If the wind comes from a different direction, perhaps we catch the lingering scent of processed materials. Tien and Ain. The deep, sharp smell of bark being stripped and prepared for tanning hides. Even if the tannery operation ceased hours before, that caustic, bitter scent clings stubbornly to the air near the workshed. It is the scent of necessary chemicals, of preservation and utility. We observe the sky, though our vision might be limited by the high, fast-moving clouds that often cross these northern latitudes. Even without a clear view of the stars, the quality of the darkness is absolute. It is a darkness that feels heavy and deep, unpolluted by any distant city light or massive industrial effort. The only lights visible are the faint golden gleam of the moon reflecting off the icy dew on the thatch, or the tiny, flickering remnants of light escaping the chimney hole of the longhouse. This visual isolation enhances the other senses. We rely on the nose and the ears to map this sleeping world. The cold intensifies the details, making every subtle shift of moisture or scent notable. Notice the slow creep of condensation. It forms first on the cold stone surfaces used for grinding grain, then on the tools left leaning against the shed wall. This moisture releases a fine mist of minerals and rust, A subtle metallic smell layered over the organic earth. The cold air compresses the entire world into a manageable, still space. It compels a sense of quiet reverence for the deep quietude. This is the profound peace that defines the interval between the labors of yesterday and the resumption of labor tomorrow. The breath continues to mist heavily, a small, transient cloud that vanishes almost instantly into the cold, demanding air. Every exhalation carries the lingering scent of the evening's meal, perhaps boiled grains or traces of cured meat. The cold air strips it away instantly, leaving only the raw scent of the environment. The sleep of the community is protected by this cold and this quiet. It is a natural guard against intrusion. Few creatures, human or animal, choose to move extensively during this time of deepest cold, preferring the stillness that preserves energy. Even the wild animals that prowl the edges of the forest are hushed, their movements cautious and muffled by the damp undergrowth. The only sounds they might make are quickly absorbed by the surrounding density. The atmosphere creates a temporal illusion. Time seems to slow down, to pool around the base of the palisade fence. Hours pass, marked only by the gradual, infinitesimal shift in the temperature and the slow transition of moisture. From vapor to ice. We focus again on the complex mixture of scents directly adjacent to the dwelling. The residual scent of the cow dung used as a floor insulator, now frozen hard and harmless. It releases only a faint, earthy ammonia, held low to the ground. The sharp scent of old, untreated leather hanging near the storage hooks, hides that have been dried but not yet fully tanned or softened. This is a smell of protein and utility. And underlying all of this, the clean, steady smell of running wood pitch used to seal the structure. A sticky, dark resin that fights the water penetration, exuding a faint, clean, smoky sweetness even in the deepest cold. This complex, layered smell of the sleeping settlement is highly specific to the Viking Age. It is a blend of intense human proximity, raw material storage, and the overwhelming dominance of the wild. Unmanaged landscape surrounding it. It is a smell of successful survival in a harsh climate. As the pre-dawn hours approach, the cold reaches its absolute zenith. The air becomes so still and so dense that it feels heavy, almost solid. If the stars are visible now, they appear exceptionally sharp, seemingly closer than at any other time of day, emphasizing the massive, indifferent scale of the universe above the small. Sleeping human endeavor below. The cold air preserves the silence. It locks the sounds in place. It makes the world brittle and fragile, emphasizing the care required for movement. Every footfall, every shift of weight would break the profound stillness, sending a startling crack through the compressed atmosphere. We remain still, breathing the measured, slow breath of the environment, allowing the cold, clear air to cycle deeply, noticing how the sinuses respond to the sharp, clean mineral quality of the air that has touched nothing but rock, ice, and ancient trees. This is the cleansing period of the day. The atmospheric reset, the lingering smells of human toil and activity are neutralized by the cold. Everything waits. The scent of moss and lichen on the large field stones near the boundary marker becomes more apparent as the residual smoke finally thins out completely. This is the smell of permanent, slow growth gold, damp, and slightly sour. The atmosphere is a study in stasis. Nothing moves quickly. Everything is locked in a slow, suspended animation dictated by the extreme temperature differential between the warm blood within the sleeping bodies and the deep, pervasive cold without. The very air seems to have settled, lying in thick, invisible drifts. Imagine this air settling on the face of the sleeping warrior, the infant, the farmer. It carries the history of the night itself, the residual smoke, the breath of the pines, the metallic tongue of the distant sea, the cold dampness of the earth. All these sensory inputs combine into a deep, pervasive quietude that acts as the final blanket of the Viking night. Is a silence that reassures by its lack of threat, and yet demands respect by its sheer weight and depth. We continue to inhale slowly, allowing the cool, structured silence to fill the space, left empty by the day's hurried existence. The night air of 800 demands patience, stillness, and the recognition of elemental forces. It is the purest expression of the Scandinavian existence, the subtle fragrance of dormant herbs, crushed underfoot earlier in the day, is now faintly released by the cold, damp pressure, a hint of mint or dried heather. Fleeting and ghost-like, it is a world perceived through texture and smell, far more than through sight. The final hours of darkness are often the coldest, the most still, the most scent-laden with the primal essences of the unpopulated world. Just beyond the palisade, we wait for the first, barely perceptible shift in the eastern sky. The change that will signal the slow, reluctant retreat of the cold, dense air and the beginning of the next cycle of ordinary Viking life. But for now, the stillness holds. The cold silence reigns absolute. The deep, dark smell of earth and cold smoke is everything. Sleep arrives in the certainty of this profound, stable atmosphere. We stand now on a silent rise of land where the ordinary world falls away. This is the place of stillness. It is a slow, quiet space where time itself seems to have paused its heavy rotation and settled into the earth beneath our feet. We are looking at a monument of Viking Age, but one that is neither grand nor imposing. It is simply a large gray stone, a Bautastine standing guard over a soft, grass-covered mound. The mound itself is ancient. Even to the people of 800 AD, it is not sharply defined, but rather a gentle, deliberate swelling of the landscape, softened by 1,000 winters and countless springs. The grass here grows differently. It is tougher, rooted deeply into the packed earth and clay that protects the long sleep of the person within. We listen to the air moving across this old turf. It makes a faint, continuous whispering sound. The friction of dry stalks against one another, a subtle sonic texture that speaks only of emptiness and open sky. The stone itself is cold to the touch, carrying the lingering chill of the night even under the mild, pale sun. Its surface is rough, granular, embedded with tiny mica flakes that catch the light. In microscopic glints, we trace the patterns of the lichen that clings to the stone's northern face. Lichen, a collaboration of fungus and algae, is the very definition of slowness. It expands its empire in almost imperceptible measure, sometimes only a millimeter across an entire decade. This stone is mapped by time, painted in shades of pale mint green and dusty, rusted orange. It shows the slow, uncompromising passage of the centuries in a way that no human-made record ever could. Imagine the hand that placed this stone, perhaps 12 or 15 generations ago. That hand belonged to a person whose own life was a fleeting, fast-moving thing of hard work, cold water, and brief summer light. That person is gone. Their story is lost. Their name is unpronounceable because it has not been spoken aloud for over 1,000 years. But the stone remains. It feels the changing pressure of the atmosphere. It absorbs the silent expansion of frost in the winter months, and it sheds the relentless deluge of the seasonal rains. It shrinks, grain by grain, year after year, dissolving back into the inorganic matrix of the land. This slow decay is the true, quiet rhythm of history. It is a rhythm that bypasses the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the urgent shouts of the farmer at market, and the creaking strain of the longship mast. It exists only in the patience of the stone. For the ordinary Scandinavian living their ordinary life in 800 AD, a place like this was a profound mystery. It was a ruin in their own time. It was the end point of history they could not yet know. A silent acknowledgement that their bustling, immediate world would one day also become quiet dust and forgotten mounds. When the farmer walked past this hogger on their way to the summer grazing lands, they would often avoid looking directly at it, not out of fear necessarily, but out of a deep-seated respect for the absolute stillness it represented. They knew the rules of the living. They knew the rules of the land. But this place belonged to a different, slower set of rules. They understood that the person resting here had completed their work. The spinning, the weaving, the cooking, the gathering of firewood, The patching of the roof, all of it had ceased. The stone is the only witness left to that finished life. We close our eyes and let the silence of this ancient hilltop settle around us. We try to perceive the scale of the time that separates us from the Iron Age people who raised this structure. It is a time so vast that our own busy lives are only a momentary flicker within the span of one large paragraph. When the sun moves low across the western horizon, the shadow cast by the standing stone lengthens dramatically, stretching out like a slow, dark finger pointing toward the sea. In this deep shadow, we imagine the layers of history lying dormant beneath the thick sod layer. Just meters down lies the faint evidence of the Viking Age farmstead post holes, perhaps, and discarded shards of dull gray pottery. Below that, there might be the remnants of an earlier Iron Age longhouse, its floor marked by compressed charcoal and burnt hearthstones, and far beneath the mound itself, we find the oldest history, the undisturbed geological layers of bedrock and glacial deposits, formed over epochs that dwarf even the slow life of the lichen. Everything is stacked here, compressed and quiet. The stillness of this monument is not a lack of activity. It is the result of overwhelming, slow-moving activity. The gravitational pull of the earth, the slow chemistry of oxidation, the constant pressure of wind and water. The air here smells clean and cold, carrying the faint mineral scent of wet stone and the clean herbal aroma of wild thyme that grows close to the ground. We listen again to the wind. It has traveled a long distance to reach this summit, moving first across the cold, dark waters of the fjord, then rising gently over the lower fields, finally encountering the rough, standing obstacle of the stone. The slight buffeting sound it makes as it moves past the rough corners of the stone is a sound that has repeated itself every moment of every day for 1,000 years. It is history as pure, monotonous sound. This reflection on the vastness of time brings a profound sense of ease. It diminishes the urgency of the present moment. The small anxieties of the Viking Age, the worry about the winter stores, the hope for a good harvest, the fear of the shifting sea, these matters, once life-defining, have all been dissolved by the gentle, persistent action of time. They are no more real than the shadows of clouds moving slowly across the surface of the fjord. Far below, the stone teaches us patience. It shows us that the things we build, the things we strive for, the very boundaries of our immediate world are entirely temporary. Fleeting flashes of warmth in a deeply cold and immensely patient universe. The most boring, most ordinary aspects of the Viking world, the texture of their everyday wool tunic, the taste of their simple rye bread, the smell of wood smoke trapped in their hair. These are the things that survive the longest. Trapped not in monuments, but in the slow, ongoing patterns of human existence. But eventually, even these patterns fade. All that remains is the simple geometry of the place. The rounded hill, the vertical stone, the endless horizontal line of the sea meeting the sky. This landscape itself becomes the true monument, absorbing the tiny vibrations of history without ever altering its own fundamental shape. We settle into the quiet, understanding that the only thing truly permanent is the process of change itself. A process so slow here that it approximates total stillness. We watch a single hawk circle lazily far above the standing stone. It is using the updraft created by the hill, floating effortlessly, suspended between the depth of the earth and the empty height of the sky. The movement of the hawk is the fastest thing in this environment. Everything else is proceeding at the speed of stone. We feel the coldness of the earth rising into us, a deep, persistent cold that reminds us of the profound depth of the slumber beneath the turf. The air thickens slightly as the sun continues its slow descent. The shadows grow longer, richer, swallowing the details of the grass and the faint irregularities of the mound. The surface of the stone now glows with a dull, diffused light, absorbing the last energy of the day. It is preparing for the long, cold quiet of the Scandinavian night. We let our focus drift completely, allowing the mind to rest on the sheer, unmoving volume of the stone.
its density, its age, its silence. It stands here, having witnessed the rise and fall of countless generations. The movement of forests, the freezing and thawing of great ice sheets. And yet, it is just a stone dot. It holds no secrets, offers no profound insight, makes no demands. It simply occupies its space, enduring the relentless, slow erosion of every element surrounding it. We breathe deeply, slowly, allowing the immense, quiet weight of this ancient place to ground our thoughts. The sensation is one of profound and enveloping peace. The noise of the immediate world fades entirely, replaced by the hushed, deep resonance of geological time. Only the stone remains, cold, quiet, waiting. The slow, steady breath of the earth continues beneath the mound, a rhythm older than any history, moving at the pace of sedimentation and star drift. This is the ultimate piece of the quiet Viking Age, the deep, patient sleep of the stone. We rest here now in the immense, quiet shadow of time itself. Let the slow rotation continue. Let the stillness settle. Let the stone stand guard. The time for holding tension has evaporated completely now. It is replaced by a profound, inevitable surrender. Feel the weight of the day pressing gently, lovingly onto your shoulders and your chest, urging you into the dense, forgiving bedding beneath you. The eyelids are not closing lightly. They are descending slowly, like great, thick felted curtains being drawn across a panorama that has suddenly ceased to matter. They carry a profound, luxurious heaviness now, a weight that is welcomed. You do not want to lift them again. The simple act of holding the eye open seems like a colossal, unnecessary effort that the body refuses to undertake. Let them stay closed. Let the darkness behind them become absolute. Inside this deep, warm shadow, the faint, shimmering after images of the dying light finally begin to dissipate, folding themselves into the smooth velvet of deep night. The frantic activity of the day, the turning of the grinding stone, the rhythm of the axe in the woodpile, the rapid movement of the shuttle on the warp, all of it slows down. Growing distant, growing irrelevant, your consciousness is pulling back, retreating from the edges of the world, moving inward toward the very center of your stillness. You notice the precise place where your body meets the bed. It is a slow, comprehensive awareness. Feel the rough, dry texture of the woolen blanket against the skin of your chin or cheek. It is the texture of the living earth itself, spun into thread. It smells faintly of wood smoke and stored lanolin, a scent of enduring safety, a scent that speaks of generations of inhabitants resting in this very same way, beneath the rough weave of the blanket. The furs provide a cushioned layer of absolute insulation. The hides are thick and still, bearing the faint, dry musk of the animal they once clothed. They accept your weight completely, molding themselves slowly to the contours of your resting form, cradling you without resistance. You are sinking deeper into the parlor, the sleeping platform built high along the wall of the longhouse. The slight give of the straw or dried moss pack beneath the furs is subtle but present. Every tiny shift in your posture is met with a soft crunching sound, immediately muffled, immediately absorbed by the quiet volume of the night. It is a supportive environment, built for this specific purpose of profound rest. The deep cold of the Scandinavian night is held at bay by the thick, impenetrable timber walls. They are breathing slowly, creaking slightly, shifting incrementally as the longhouse settles into its deepest repose. These are sounds of endurance, not disturbance. Listen closely to the faint, lingering warmth. The fire on the central hearth has been reduced hours ago to a billow coals, then finally covered with ash to preserve the heat until the first light of morning. Yet, the ghost of that enormous, roaring heat remains. It radiates outward from the vents. Heavy stones that line the hearth pit, they have held the fire's intensity all day long. And now they release that stored energy slowly, systematically, into the still air of the room. It is a deep, permeating heat, not sharp or stinging, but comforting.
rising steadily around your feet and limbs. It mixes with the warmth generated by the collective bodies sleeping nearby, creating a deep, shared cloud of security within the longhouse. Feel the warmth gather under the thick wool covering your legs. The tension in the muscles of the calves and thighs is dissolving now, flowing away, emptying out like water from a leather bucket left unattended in the rain. They become heavy, pleasantly numb, utterly relaxed. The blood moves slowly, deliberately. Through your veins, the rhythm of your breathing is also slowing, deepening, becoming a low, resonant drone that matches the collective exhalation of the sleeping household. You are breathing in unison with the heavy timber, the packed earth, and the souls resting near you. Inhale the scent of wood smoke, held captive within the fibers of the roof thatch. Exhale the worries of the waking world. Let your mind drift. It requires no effort. The thoughts that raced through your mind earlier, the planning of the harvest, the mending of the nets, the distant promise of the journey, they have all lost their urgent coloration. They slow down, turning viscous, turning soft, melting into each other. They become simple, beautiful, slow-moving pictures behind the closed eyelids. A flash of the sun catching the wet side of a newly built boat hull. A sudden memory of the taste of fresh wild berry, sweet and tart on the tongue. The sensation of the cold river water rushing past your ankles in the summer heat. These are not stories. They are merely textures and sensations, fleeting glimpses of a reality that is retreating further and further away. You are sinking now, not just into the bed, but into the deepest strata of the night. Imagine yourself settling down, heavier and heavier, into the great dark cradle of the longhouse. The ceiling seems impossibly distant, lost in the shadows, high above the roof beams. All sound from the world outside has been softened, muted, absorbed into the deep, damp earth. The distant sigh of the sea, which was a constant, restless presence during the day, is now barely audible, a low, massive whisper heard only by the deep ear. It is the sound of water moving endlessly over sand and stone, a sound older than the village itself, the wind that rattles the branches of the pines. Outside, the palisade touches the roof thatch only as a gentle, continuous pressure. It is a subtle push against the solid structure that holds you safe. You are insulated. You are protected. You are utterly still. The heaviness moves now from your limbs to the very center of your being. The heart is beating slowly, deeply, responsibly, moving the thick, nourishing blood through the warm corridors of the body. Each beat is a deep, comfortable thud, a reliable metronome marking time that no longer matters. Feel the profound weight of your hands resting where they fall, perhaps folded lightly across your stomach, or place palms up beside your head. They are enormous anchors of bone and muscle, perfectly still, perfectly relaxed. The tension in the intricate small bones of the fingers has vanished. There is nothing left to grasp, nothing left to hold on to. Let the final vestiges of waking thought dissolve entirely. If a thought tries to form, let it roll gently away from the edge of your consciousness. Like a pebble dropped into still water, leaving only slow, spreading ripples that quickly fade. The night is vast and silent. This deep rest is a necessary thing, a sacred withdrawal demanded by the long, difficult rotation of the seasonal year. Every living creature in the surrounding forest is practicing the same profound stillness now. The badger has curled tight into its burrow. The great elk rests motionless beneath the spruce. The small, quick fish have sunk to the bottom of cold fjord waters, waiting patiently for the dawn. You are part of this massive, collective pause. You are resting in time with the deep, slow turning of the earth itself. Allow the warmth beneath the wool to become almost suffocatingly comforting. It is the warmth of utter security, the warmth of the community resting beside you. You can almost feel the collective, rhythmic breathing of the others sharing the long room. The air is thick, close, and ancient. It is the air of human presence, warmed by human life, filled with the faint, comforting residue of last night's cooking fire and the dry scent of cured animal hides. It is the air of home, sinking deeper. You find that the structure of the longhouse begins to lose its sharp definition. The sturdy walls, the heavy posts, the rough-hewn beams, they are no longer separate objects. They melt into a single, encompassing shell of safety. You are contained. You are enveloped entirely by the dark, warm, protective shell of this dwelling built centuries ago for the purpose of enduring the long, freezing nights. The weight in your eyelids increases exponentially. It is an overwhelming, luxurious drag pulling you down, down, down into the center of the supportive darkness. Let the physical body become impossibly heavy. Heavier than stone, heavier than iron forged at the SMHHY. Feel the heavy pull of gravity increasing its hold, insisting on absolute stillness, demanding a deep surrender. Sink into the bedding. Sink into the furs. Sink into the earth beneath the planks. Sink into the history held within the timber walls. There is nowhere else to be. Nothing else to do. The mind is quiet now, almost entirely empty. The vast, slow, patient silence is finally beginning to dominate the interior space. If you observe the lingering thoughts, you find they are now only textures, the roughness of a rope being pulled. The slickness of polished bone, the cool, damp feel of morning fog on the face. No words accompany these textures. No meanings attached to them. They simply exist for a moment and then dissolve into the deep, warm wash of approaching sleep. You are letting go of the edge of the known world. The boundaries of the self are softening now. The clear distinction between the body and the bed, between the resting form and the surrounding air, begins to blur. You become part of the warm, smoky atmosphere of the longhouse. This is the true, deep repose of the ancient world. A simple, profound stillness earned by immense labor under the cold northern sky. Every breath is slow. Every movement is a distant memory. The final trace of wakefulness is dissolving now, thinning out like winter mist rising from a frozen field under the early sun. Allow the eyelids to settle so heavily that they fuse with the darkness behind them. Feel the absolute stillness of your own face. The muscles around the jaw are entirely slack. The tongue rests loose in the mouth. The forehead is smooth and free of all concern. This stillness is complete. This stillness is heavy. This stillness is deep. Rest now, in the profound, enduring warmth of the Viking night. Let the darkness carry you further, sinking deeper and deeper into the quiet volume of history. There's only the warmth. There is only the weight. There's only the long, slow, hypnotic rest. You are sinking. Sinking gently. Sinking completely. And so we reach the deep conclusion of this very ordinary time. The long day has finally folded itself into the deep, quiet shelter of the night. The work is complete. The dust of the day's tasks has settled onto the packed earth floor of the longhouse. There's nothing left to organize. Nothing left to worry about or to plan for tomorrow. The silence that now fills this space is not an empty absence of sound, but a rich, heavy silence that is warmed by the memory of the fire. You can sense the lingering heat radiating slowly from the stones that form the central hearth. A heat that is sinking gently into the fibers of the thick woven blankets covering your body. The air above you, close to the rafters, remains still and perhaps carries the faintest scent of wood smoke and damp peat. That is a smell that means safety. A smell that means home. The shadows that cling to the walls are absolutely still now. They are deep and unwavering, having absorbed all movement and all light. If you were to open your eyes just a fraction, you would see nothing but the heavy, perfect dark. A dark that feels ancient and complete. But your focus drifts now from the specific details of 800 A. Let the image of the Viking settlement soften at the edges, dissolving slowly into the universal truth of nighttime rest. The fjord outside is a sheet of black glass, utterly undisturbed. The small waves that slap playfully against the hull of the newly built Nair earlier today have now retreated. They are quiet. They are sleeping. Listen very closely, not with your ears, but with the quiet center of your mind. Can you perceive the absolute stillness of the world?
outside the protective walls of this structure. The vast encompassing silence of the northern landscape at rest. The great fir trees stand motionless, their heavy branches holding the weight of the cooling air. They are quiet sentinels of the deep dark. The moon, if it is visible at all, casts a weak, silvered light that has no impact on the profound darkness within the walls of this house. You are shielded. You are secure. Allow yourself to sink deeper now, feeling the weight of the blankets pressed down gently across your hips and across your shoulders. This heaviness is safe. It is comforting. It is the sign that your body understands that its labors are finished. Your feet, perhaps tired from walking the damp soil or standing over the forge, are now completely surrendered to the warmth of the heavy furs wrapped around them. They are relaxed. Your calves and the large muscles of your thighs are softening, releasing any residual tension they held from the work of carrying you through the day. Let them be heavy. Let them be still. Focus your attention on your breathing now, not forcing it, but simply observing the slow, reliable, rhythmic motion of your chest. The air comes in slowly, cool and clean. The air goes out even more slowly, releasing warmth and releasing all effort. Inhale the quiet. Exhale the day. Each breath is an anchor, pulling you further and further down into a state of deep, undisturbed rest. You are sinking effortlessly. You are settling into the earth. The people of this time, the ordinary people we have been watching, are now all asleep around you. The farmer who worked the fields of barley, the woman who spun the thread on the spindle, the shipwright who tapped the oak pegs into the clinker planks. Their minds are empty now. Their bodies are deeply restored. Their collective stillness adds a layer of absolute peace to your own resting place. You're surrounded by sleep, surrounded by safety. Let us consider the passage of time here. Now that the clock has stopped, the year 800 AD is dissolving. The precise details of the early Middle Ages are blurring into the slow, immense sweep of history. This specific moment, this specific place, is merging with every quiet night that has ever been, and every quiet night that ever will be. The stillness you feel is the same stillness felt by those in every century who found themselves sheltered in the dark, waiting for the return of the sun. This is timeless rest. Allow your jaw to relax completely. Let your teeth separate just slightly. The muscles in your face, the small muscles around your eyes, are softening and releasing all strain. Your eyelids are heavy, perfectly still, sealed shut against the light. They have no reason to lift. Behind the closed lids, the spaces in your mind are clearing. The thoughts that circled and lingered earlier have begun to slow down, to soften. Imagine them as small flakes of ash, gently floating down from the ceiling of your mind. They drift slowly, slowly, until they land softly on the packed earth of your inner quiet, and they dissolve upon impact. There's no more movement. There's no more friction. Just a smooth, slow descent into the silence. Your arms are heavy, draped at your sides or resting gently across your chest. Feel the weight of your hands. They are completely relaxed, the fingers slightly curved, without any effort to grasp or hold anything at all. This is the surrender of control. You do not need to hold on to the day. You do not need to hold on to the future. You are perfectly safe right here, right now, suspended in the deepest, most quiet moment of the night. The cold that often finds its way into the northern climate is held back by the deep insulation of the turf and the thick, dense walls of the longhouse. You are encased in warmth. A core warmth that radiates outward from your center. Feel the soft, steady rhythm of your heart, a low drum beating in time with the deep quiet of the universe. It is slow. It is steady. It is reliable. There is nothing threatening in the darkness, only softness and rest. Let us return once more to the idea of the great quiet dust settling. Imagine the historical record itself is now slowing down. The battles fade into distant echoes. The sagas are whispered until they are too faint to hear. The bustling marketplace is completely silent. All the noise of history is muted, dampened, absorbed by the immense quiet of the earth beneath you. You are Protected by centuries of silence. You are held by the weight of the land. The weight of the earth presses up against the floor beneath your sleeping form,
holding you securely in place.
You cannot fall.
You can only settle. Sink deeper now.
One slow, deliberate breath after another. Allow the thought of sleep to become a physical sensation. A heavy, warm current flowing over you, washing away the final remnants of wakefulness. The Viking longhouse is just a shape now in the dark. A hollow space of safety. The timbers above are dark. The roof is dark. The world outside is impossibly dark, and you are sinking into a corresponding internal darkness, which is not frightening, but deeply restorative and peaceful. Your mind is slowing. The thoughts are slowing. The energy is slowing. Everything is moving at the speed of settling dust. It takes a long time for the smallest particle to settle completely. A very long time? You are taking that time now. You're settling perfectly. Let the number of hours
remaining until dawn become meaningless.
Time is suspended. There's only the deep, continuous now of rest. If a sound were to occur outside, the call of a night bird or the whisper of the wind across the thatch,
it would register only as a soft, meaningless ripple on the surface of your tranquility.
It cannot disturb the depth you have reached. You are too heavy to be moved. Too deep to be awakened. You are descending into the very foundation of sleep. A dreamless, profound sleep where the body repairs itself entirely. Every muscle fiber is slack. Every nerve ending is quieted. The Viking Age, the ordinary life of 800 AD, is now nothing more than a faint, pleasant hum, fading, dissolving completely into the soft texture of your quiet mind. There's nothing to see, nothing to hear, nothing to do. Just the sensation of profound, heavy rest washing over you. Let the silence become the only sound. A perfect, complete, unmoving silence. This is the end of the history. This is the beginning of the quiet. Sink. Settle. Sleep. You are safe. You're heavy. The blankets are warm. The darkness is deep. Your breath is slow. Your rest is absolute. Let all lingering thoughts of the cold iron tools, the rough wool tunics, the smell of salted fish, the heavy work of the long day simply drift away now. They have served their purpose in calming the surface of your mind. Now they may depart completely, leaving behind only the perfect stillness. The stillness of the sleeping fjord, the stillness of the rooted trees, the stillness within the heart of the heavy stones of the hearth. You are merging with that stillness now. Let the feeling of profound safety grow stronger with every passing moment. A feeling that wraps around you like the heaviest, warmest blanket ever woven. You are completely held. You are completely secure. There's no edge to the darkness now. It is simply an infinite soft cushion receiving your entire weight. Allow your entire consciousness to soften, to blur, to release its rigid focus. Everything is melting into ease. Everything is dissolving into the deep quiet. The very concept of ordinary life in 8 has served its purpose. It has slowed your waking mind down to the pace of slow history. And now history yields to sleep. Yield completely. You are moving away from the light of awareness, moving deeper into the shadows of absolute repose. Let your shoulders drop entirely, releasing the tension they held throughout the entire history of the day. They are heavy. They are relaxed. Your neck is loose. Your spine is lengthening and resting heavily against the support beneath you. The weight is immense. The relaxation is complete. Every cell in your body is now whispering the word. Rest. 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 Your breathing continues its slow, reliable rhythm, moving like the tide in the deepest, most quiet part of the ocean. Slow, strong, and unwavering. You are protected by the weight of the dark. You are insulated by the thickness of the old wood and the earth. There is no further journey tonight. There is only the settling here. You have reached the conclusion, the final deep conclusion. Nothing more is required of you. Only the softness, only the quiet. Allow the final sensory input to fade completely. The faint scent of smoke is gone. The gentle memory of the hearth heat is fading. There's only the internal sensation of sinking, of peace, of deep, endless sleep. Sink further. Settle completely. Sleep now. Sleep deeply. The world of the Vikings is quiet. The world within you is quiet. Rest. Deep rest. Perfect silence.